All right, I have an introduction. I hope you saw our author on Carol Marine the other night on TTW. Third generation Chicagoan. His writes about history, blah, 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 blah. Has degrees from Harvard, University, Chicago, and Northwestern. Just goes to show you. You could go to those minor schools and still be a success. And a liberal arts degree from Carleton College. Keith, you've been to a lot of universities. You need not explain why you went to so many. Ladies and gentlemen, the author of the new book on Rich Daley, first son, Keith Koeneman.
So it's really wonderful for me to be here today, and I'd like to thank each of you for coming. In particular, I'd like to thank Jay Doherty and Paul Green for hosting me here today. I'd also like to thank my friends and family who's been a big support. I really appreciate it. As many of you know, the Daley family has been involved in Chicago politics for over 90 years. The city of Chicago has evolved tremendously during those 9 decades. And so in many ways, the story of the Daley family is really the story of us in our city. In 1960, John F. Kennedy narrowly defeated Richard Nixon in the election to become president of the United States. According to the press, Kennedy was helped by a remarkable voter turnout in Chicago. Some observers even speculated that the first mayor, Daley, Dick Daley, snatched the Illinois election for Kennedy. It's a rumor, who knows? But in Washington, D.C., politicians invented jokes to explain the first Mayor Daley's power and what had occurred in the 1960 presidential race. One popular story featured President Kennedy, Secretary of State Dean Rusk, and Mayor Daley on a lifeboat in the middle of the Pacific Ocean with only enough food for one of them. The 3 men agree that 2 must go overboard. So JFK says, "I'm the President of the United States. I'm too important." And the Secretary of State echoed the president, saying, "It's the Cold War. I am essential to the nation." With a poker face, Dick Daley suggested a compromise. "Listen, gentlemen, the only democratic thing to do is to vote." The mayor won the vote by a vote of 8-2. Jokes aside, the first Mayor Daley was a larger-than-life figure who cast a long shadow over Chicago's politics and history. In order to understand the son, therefore, it's essential to understand the father. Like all of us, his son, Rich, took the history that he inherited from his father and reshaped it into a new version of our city, Chicago. Let's see if this works. Today we're going to start to assess the leadership of that son, the second Mayor Daley, by trying to address the question, what is Richard M. Daley's legacy? Our conversation today is a public policy talk, and so we will focus on the second Mayor Daley's accomplishments and mistakes as a leader, rather than on his personal life story. So this list is from an article I wrote for Illinois Issues, which is a well-respected public policy magazine. And you know, I try to be very even-handed about Rich Daley's accomplishments and mistakes as mayor. But I think, you know, as we are here today on the 24th anniversary of his inauguration as mayor in 1989, I think it's important for us to really to understand how difficult it is to be mayor. It's a very, very difficult job. It's extremely difficult to be mayor of Chicago. And for me, an analogy that I think is important is it's like being a professional baseball player, right? So let's say you had a long career in baseball for many years, decades even, and you hit 300 in baseball. Well, if you hit 300 in baseball over a long career, you're probably an all-star. I mean, you might even be a Hall of Famer, because hitting a baseball that's thrown at your head at 90 or 100 miles an hour is extremely difficult to do. But if you hit 300, it means that 7 out of 10 times you struck out or you made a mistake. So I think it's important to keep in mind you could both, you know, be an all-star and have mistakes and be the same person. So I think we should keep that in mind as we talk about these things today. So Rich Daley was the longest-serving mayor in the history of Chicago, and in the course of his 22 years in office had many significant accomplishments. One accomplishment is the improvement of race relations in Chicago. It might be hard for us to remember today, but back in the 80s, prior to the second mayor Daley taking office, Chicago was known at that time for having poor race relations. There was something called the Council Wars, which was very divisive and which had a very significant racial component. Today, you don't hear that in Chicago. Today, there's many sort of black and Hispanic, very successful politicians, successful business people, successful entertainers, and this racial strife is no longer part of our city. Another really big accomplishment is the second mayor Daley took big risks for public housing and public schools. And I think one of the things a leader does is focus the organization he leads or she leads on things that are important. And I think we would all agree that public schools and public housing are very important. In 1995, Rich Daley was the first big city mayor in the country to take personal responsibility for the schools. It was considered a very politically risky thing to do, and many of his people advised him against doing it. A few years later, in 1999, he did something called the Plan for Transformation, which was very politically risky in terms of public housing. And yeah, I think people can have legitimate differences of opinion on whether those risks with respect to schools and housing worked out. But I don't think in any way does that diminish the accomplishments of a leader, because a leader is someone who tries to get people to focus on important things. Another significant accomplishment is the second mayor Daley provided 2 decades of stability to the political and business communities. And at first glance, this might not seem like a big deal, but it's actually a really big deal because, as many of you know who lead organizations here, it's very tough to plan for the future, to invest for the future, to take risks for the future in an unstable environment. And Daley first took office in 1989, and most of you probably remember, in the 13 years prior to 1989, from 1976 to 1989, Chicago was chaos. We had 5 mayors in 13 years. We had 5 superintendents of the schools, and we had this horrible reputation. People said Beirut by the lake. Well, Daley took office in 1989, and that chaotic environment went away. And so business people and politicians could do things in terms of planning for the future. So I think Daley's most significant accomplishment as mayor is the transformation of Chicago into a global city. I don't know if you can see this slide, but this is the intersection of Michigan Avenue and Monroe Streets 5 years before Rich Daley was born. It's an attractive photo, but it sort of looks like a small town. It looks like sort of a small town in the Midwest. If you look at the same intersection while Rich Daley was mayor, you can see here the transformation of Chicago into a global city. This is the exact same intersection. So you can, of course, see Millennium Park. You can see part of the skyline here. In 2010, Chicago was ranked 6th on the Global Cities Index, following cities such as New York, London, Tokyo, Paris, and Hong Kong. So I've personally lived in New York, Tokyo, and Chicago. I've also spent significant time in London, Paris, and Hong Kong. And you know, these are great urban centers with strong economies and lots of culture. Yeah, but it's someone who, you know, there's this current controversy going around in terms of, you know, comparing Chicago to New York by that sourpuss, I can't remember her name. But you know, the thing which she misses is these great cities, which Chicago is a peer with. You know, all these great cities have all sorts of the same challenges that she talked about in her article. So, for example, when I lived in Tokyo, Tokyo is a gigantic city that has lots of corruption. But you know most gigantic cities do, and I think Daley had a great accomplishment in his role of helping Chicago evolve, you know, from a Rust Belt city with a lot of problems into a global city that we are today. Another accomplishment is the expansion of OHare and Midway airports, and at first blush, this might not seem like a big deal, but you know, it's a very big deal. So we have a $460 billion economy, which the greater Chicago area. It's a huge number, and there's no way that you can have a $460 billion economy without some really significant airports such as OHare and Midway. And so Daley's expansion of these under his leadership was really important. Another accomplishment is support of culture and the arts. It's interesting to me that this kid from Bridgeport became associated with culture and the arts, and I think it's to his credit that Rich Daley and his wife Maggie, you know, were passionate about the arts and great supporters of the arts, and this is what has helped to improve quality of life for us and for our city. Similarly, Rich Daley helped to beautify Chicago, and sometimes he was a little fanatical about flowers and trees and fences and so forth. But it's great. You know, it makes our city a more livable place, and we all benefit from it. But you know, as someone who's been a leader for a long time, you would expect they would not only have accomplishments but mistakes. Oh, actually, one more accomplishment. I actually think this is really important. So Rich Daley was a significant and consistent supporter of gay rights since 1989. And this is 2 months after he came in office. He was the first major politician of any party in Illinois or Chicago to support, to be in the Gay Pride Parade. This is June in 1989. It's a really hot day, and I think it's interesting that he's wearing like a wool jacket. But I think this is important for two reasons. One, obviously, you know, supporting gay rights and people's rights is important in and of itself. But I think it was also important for other reasons, because I think it signified to Chicagoans that he was going to be the mayor for all the people, not just for a certain group of people or a certain type of people, but for all the people. And I think it was very significant for those reasons. So like I said, you know, you would expect a leader of an organization who'd been in office for 22 years to have a few strikeouts as well as a few home runs. And the way I like to think about it is this, and I think it's really important to remember how just difficult it is to be mayor of Chicago. It's very, very difficult, right? So we're all familiar with a Rubiks Cube. So a Rubiks Cube is a square. It has 6 sides, and each side is a different color. And with a Rubiks Cube, almost anyone can solve one side of a Rubiks Cube. It's actually pretty easy. But to solve 2 sides is significantly harder. And to solve 6 sides is very difficult. Almost no one can do 6 sides of a Rubiks Cube. And so that's like being mayor of Chicago, right? So you have just the big Rubiks Cube sitting on your desk every morning when you come into work. And you know, you have to balance the budget, you have to try and lower crime, you have to try and improve the schools, you have to try and improve public housing, you have to try and bring more jobs to Chicago, and you have to do that without everyone getting mad at you. It's pretty tough. It's pretty tough. And you know, sometimes when you're working on a Rubiks Cube, you get like the orange side and the yellow side, and they say, I'm going to try and do the blue side. And by the time you got the blue side, the yellow side and the orange side are all screwed up. So one mistake, this is actually 2 mistakes, is the pension crisis and the large structural budget deficit. This is something that all of us as Chicagoans are dealing with today, and which the current mayor of Chicago is dealing with today. And it's really significant. And if you look at the photograph here, this is the parking meters, and obviously there was a transaction a few years ago that we're all familiar with, and it was somewhat controversial. And I think the point here, though, is in doing the parking meter transaction, it really didn't address the root cause of the issue. And the root issues were a pensions crisis where we had underfunded pensions, and we had a large structural budget deficit, and we really needed to focus on those issues rather than on doing a parking meter deal. Another significant mistake is a failure to take on entrenched unions, and this omission is actually a contributing factor in the pension crisis and the structural budget deficit. We as Chicagoans will never be able to fix our pensions and fix our budget unless we take on the entrenched unions. Another mistake is the midnight destruction of Meigs Field. This occurred, you know, in the middle of the night and in the dark. And my mom's here today. When I was in high school, I used to sneak in the house in the middle of the night, and my mom would come down and she'd say, "What are you doing sneaking around in the middle of the night? Nothing good ever happens after midnight." And that was true of me in high school, and that is also true of Meigs Field. Another mistake is a tolerance for political corruption. This is a picture of the city's former head of intergovernmental affairs after he was convicted in July of 2006 for hiring fraud. This is not a good thing. And on Daley's watch, there was also other scandals, including the hired truck scandal, where 48 people were convicted and sent to jail. That is not a good thing either. So this is the final one here. So, you know, a high level of crime persisted towards the end of the mayor's term. I'm actually very empathetic about this problem. I think when we think of our Rubiks Cube, this is a very tough one. This is a very tough problem to solve. So I'm very empathetic about it. And if someone sort of made it my responsibility to lower crime in Chicago, I would feel that a very difficult challenge. But the point here is it's really important. And even though it's a difficult problem, we should have focused on it more. So this brings us back to our original list. We didn't go through all these today in terms of time, but you know, I'll just sort of finish, you know, how I started, which is here today on the 24th anniversary of Daley's inauguration as mayor. Yeah, I think we should keep in mind the baseball analogy. You know, if you're someone who has a long career in baseball and you bat 300, you're probably an all-star. You also probably, you know, struck out 7 out of 10 times because it's very difficult to do. To be a professional baseball player and to be a mayor of a large city such as Chicago is very, very difficult. So my sense is that history's judgment is going to be that Richard M. Daley's mistakes outweighed, I'm sorry, that his accomplishments outweighed his mistakes, and that history is going to be very kind with regard to Richard M. Daley and his legacy, and I think we've benefited from his years in office. So I'll stop there and see if you have questions or comments.
If you have questions, City Club E is right over there, and unaccustomed as I am to this topic, Keith, on all your interviews, you said that about the book, you never got to any of the members of the Daley family. Could you talk a little bit about that? Sure. Because that's really an important point.
Sure. So I interviewed well over 100 people for the book, well in excess of 100 people, both on the record and off the record. I did contact the Daley family early on, actually before any of my interviews, and was very upfront about my project. I told them I planned on writing a very high-quality book, which I believe I did, and I asked the mayor, through representatives both in writing and verbally, if he would, you know, cooperate with the book. And I was hopeful that they would, and they just made the decision not to, which I respect. And hopefully the mayor will write a memoir or autobiography, and I'll be the first person to buy it.
Okay. Good question. John Hammerschlag. Where are you, John? Be careful when you answer this one. Very close. Do you think if the mayor had been successful in bringing the 2016 Olympics to Chicago, he would have chosen to run for office again instead of retiring? Excellent question.
Well, that's a great question. You know, it's hard to speculate how someone feels about something. Yeah, my experience as a professional, I think most of us as professionals, you know, sort of when we get up in the morning and, you know, you're thinking about your day or thinking about your week or thinking about your month, you know, it's always nice to have like a big project you're excited about, right? It just, you know, life is hard. We all work hard. And it makes life easier if you have a big sort of exciting project. So to answer your question, I think if we got the Olympics, that would have been a big exciting project for the mayor, is my sense. But I'm not sure if that would have been decisive. You know, he had been the longest-serving mayor in the history of Chicago. He had surpassed his father with respect to that accomplishment, and I think that was personally important to him. By staying on another 4 years, you can't do that twice. That's already sort of a notch in your belt. And you know, his approval ratings were at an all-time low. His approval ratings were in the mid-30s. They're about 35%. And yeah, he's a very talented, insightful politician. And you know, whenever you have approval ratings in the mid-30s, it's risky to run again. And so I don't know. I think it's a coin toss.
Not that I would ever comment, but who in this room would think that he would be happy with someone else cutting the ribbon? Okay, Dave Lundy, and I'll be quiet. Dave Lundy. Many believe, Dave Lundy believes, using the word some and many doesn't cut it in the City Club, believes destroying the business asset that was Meigs was a strange decision for a pro-business mayor. Were you ever able to figure out his true motivation?
Well, I'm not sure. You know, some close friends of the Daley family who I talked to off the record said that the noise used to drive him and Maggie crazy. And I was told that repeatedly by people who were close to the Daleys. So, you know, whether that's enough of a reason, who knows. So I'll just leave it at that.
Well, we answered this from Tom Leahy. Tom, where are you? Okay. What do you think of the article? We won't mention the woman's name. And would you like her to review your book? This is a City Club question.
So I think you're referring to the article in the New York Review of Books on 3 recent Chicago books that sort of basically did a broadside attack of the city of Chicago by this New Yorker without actually reviewing the books. No, so the article was poorly written, and more important, you know, the thinking behind the article was just wrong. You know, so like I mentioned before, in order to be a global city, you need 2 things. You need to have a really strong and powerful economy, and you really need to have sophisticated culture and the arts, because that's what people demand out of a global city. So Chicago has a $460 billion economy. It has one of the largest airports in the world. It has two of the most important universities in the world. It has some of the best restaurants in the world. It has some of the most sophisticated in culture and arts in the world. And she didn't say any of this in her article. So you know, if she reviewed my book, I think she'd probably miss the boat there as well.
No idea what self-restraint's all about. Okay, we have one more question. Graham Grady, Shesky and Froelich. How much of an influence was Maggie Daley on the mayor's administration, particularly in arts and culture?
So my sense is, you know, Maggie Daley was, you know, sort of a sophisticated and cultured woman, and I think she had passions about certain things, you know, like culture, arts, education, and travel. And my sense is that her passion sort of rubbed off on her husband, and he adopted him as his passions. And because he was a powerful person, you know, if you're passionate about something, you can impact not just your own life, but other people's lives as well. So that's my sense of that relationship.
Okay, round of applause. Well done.